guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Be Brave podcast with me, your host, Grace. Today's episode is going to be split into two parts as there are so many different examples to cover. We're going to be talking about what to say and what not to say to someone struggling with an eating disorder. If you are struggling with an eating disorder and you're listening to this episode, you might find it helpful to share this episode with friends or family members to give them some insight as to what might be triggering and what might be helpful. That way you can avoid having long-winded conversations and repeating those conversations over and over again. If you are a friend or a family member coming to listen to this podcast, thank you for listening and for educating yourself so that you can better support your loved ones. Unfortunately, eating disorders are amazing at twisting words. Even well-intentioned comments can feel hurtful when someone is struggling with an eating disorder. So it's helpful to have a few ideas about generic statements to avoid and what someone could say instead. I'd like to reiterate that everyone experiences an eating disorder differently, so a statement that triggers one person might not trigger another person. Similarly, something that doesn't upset one individual might upset someone else. So it's really important to have conversations with people who are struggling so they can tell you if there are specific things that trigger them. Jumping straight into an example of what you don't want to say can be really harmful to say something along the lines of, "But I've seen you eat." Whilst the stereotypical portrayal of someone with an eating disorder is just a person who doesn't eat, this is really not a realistic expectation. Almost all people with eating disorders do eat, otherwise they wouldn't be alive. There are so many various types of eating disorders, and many of them don't include restrictive behaviors. Something you could say instead could be along the lines of, "I don't fully understand the complexity of eating disorders. If you feel comfortable, I'd really appreciate hearing how you're impacted by an eating disorder." If you ask something like this, some people may be willing to share and illustrate their own experiences, whilst others may want to keep it private. So ensure you respect their boundary and don't press for information if they don't want to share. Another extremely harmful statement to say to someone with an eating disorder is, "But you don't look like you have an eating disorder." So many people say this and don't realize how harmful it can be. Unfortunately, due to dramatized stereotypes created by social media and today's society, many people believe that someone can only have an eating disorder if they're extremely thin. Actually, anyone could be struggling with an eating disorder, irrespective of gender, age, body type, ethnicity, or any other factor. Instead of commenting on their appearance and questioning if they really have an eating disorder, you could say, "I'm really sorry to hear that you're struggling. I believe you and am here to help in any way I can." It's so important to express to someone struggling with an eating disorder that you believe them, no matter what, so they never feel as if they have to prove to you that they are deserving of help or that they are struggling. One incredibly common comment that's really well-intentioned but not well received at all is, "You look so much better," or "You look so healthy." Whilst I understand this is almost always well-intentioned, this phrase can often cause people with eating disorders to believe you're implying that they've put on a lot of weight or that their struggle is no longer valid. Instead, you could say, "It's so much fun spending time with you now that you have more energy." Phrases like this can be used if you've noticed that they're really working on recovery and they are making positive steps. That way, you're commenting on the life that they're gaining back, not on their body size, because that's not important. Bringing the focus to a benefit of recovery that has nothing to do with their physical appearance can also be a great way to show someone that you notice their hard work without placing that emphasis on changes to their body. Whilst it's really commonplace in today's society to talk about calories and macros and things like that, it can be detrimental to have these conversations with people with eating disorders. So it's important to avoid comments like, "Do you know how many calories or grams of sugar or any other nutritional info is in that food?" that they're about to eat. Numbers can become a really large concern for people with eating disorders, so it's important to not accentuate this distress. Food is just food, and for someone with an eating disorder, any type of food is healthier than a disordered mindset. Instead of commenting on caloric information or good or bad foods, quote unquote, just say anything that's unrelated to food. If you feel tempted to comment on someone's food choices, remind yourself that it has nothing to do with you and think of a different topic to discuss with them. Could be something like things happening in your life at the moment, or if you're really stuck, just talk about the weather. That is still better than talking to them about food. One type of statement that people often don't realize can be harmful is negative self-talk. So if you say something along the lines of, I look terrible, or I look fat, or I look ugly, or this dress isn't flattering on my body, or I need to lose some weight, things along those lines, it can still be really harmful for someone struggling with an eating disorder, even though you're not commenting on their health or their body size. This is because focusing on your own body, your weight, shape, appearance, reinforces the idea that appearance is an important part of who we are, when really it's one of the least interesting things about someone. Instead of things about your own body, you could say things like, I'm so glad that my body enables me to hug my family and laugh. By modeling a positive relationship with your body, you'll help to set a good example for someone struggling with an eating disorder. I hope that these examples give you a bit of a better idea of topics to discuss and not to discuss when you have a friend, co-worker, family member, or anyone in your life that's struggling with an eating disorder. If you have any specific questions about how to best support someone in your life with an eating disorder, please feel free to reach out. My contact details are always listed in the show notes. Additionally, make sure to come back next week for part 2, which will include even more examples of what to say and not to say. Don't forget that you are brave, you are strong, and you are worthy of having positive and supportive relationships. Until next time, keep being brave.